also.
Okay. Okay. It is being shown there also.
Madam, we'll start now.
Please.
We have YouTube channel, so people will join there also.
Sure.
Good afternoon, one and all. Respected today's speaker, Madam Professor Shakila Shamshuji, respected Vice Chancellor of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, Registrar, Director Academic, Finance Officer, and my colleagues from the Faculty of Commerce and Business Management, Professor Y.S. Kiranmai, Dr. Radhakrishna, Dr. Rabindranath Solomon, Dr. Srinivas, and my member colleagues of the IIC, BRAOU, and dear friends, participants, colleagues, good evening all of you, good afternoon all of you, and welcome to this webinar being organized by IIC BRAOU, which is the flagship of AICTE and Ministry of Education, through which we are organizing this program under the flagship of IIC Institutions Innovation Council of Dr. BRAOU, which was recently constituted as per the AICTE norms. And so far, we have conducted 3 programs, 2 programs under Q1. That was on World Creativity and Innovation Day, took place on 21st April. And second program was National Technology Day on 11th May. And third program was recently took place on 5th June, that is World Environment Day. And now this is the 4th program under this series of IIC, which is taking place, which is an important one, is on transformation of education through new education policy. To celebrate the 4th anniversary of National Education Policy 2020, which was constituted by the Government of India in 2017 during June, and the report was submitted in 2019 May by its chairman, Kasturi Rangan, who is space scientist, engineer and academician. And we all of us know now many universities in the country, universities and educational institutions, both autonomous and other institutions also following NEP, though it is not mandatory on the part of state government, but still there are many states in the country being followed this NEP, and some other universities are not yet, as there is no policy decision by the respective state governments. So, but most of the education institutions in the country are being followed, at least in a way, to internationalize our education and curriculum to make our learners to fly across the globe. So friends, we all of us know how important it is, and we have today a very eminent speaker, Professor Shakila Shamshuji, who is also the draft committee member and presently OSD to New Education Policy, Department of Higher Education on Innovation, Ministry of Education, Government of India, New Delhi. Madam, welcome you on behalf of my faculty and my university to this program. And there are several teachers and students are participating in this program. And I hope we all of us will benefit from your talk. And we are eagerly waiting for you to hear on new education policy. We all of us know. And with what aim the new education policy was introduced or being implemented by the universities, And I would like to touch upon a few important aspects that NEP 2020 focused on in its key as its key policy in Madam's talk. I would like to just give you some ideas and how it is being implemented and what are the challenges that are being faced at the government level, at the policy level, at the institutional level, and also the government level. It has something, yeah. Hello, Madam, am I audible?
Yeah, we lost you in between, but now you're audible again.
Yeah, some technical reason. Sorry, madam. Yeah. So, friends, we all of us know the focus of new education policy 2020, and just I would like to give some highlights. One is inclusive and equitable education, holistic and multidisciplinary education, flexibility and autonomy, quality and accountability, technology integration, vocational and skill education component, language and cultural diversity, research and innovation, governance and regulation, and most important thing is internationalization of higher education. So we all of us know the very good number of students are flying abroad for higher education. So it is also one of the aim to stop the student, those who are flying abroad to pursue higher education, and they can have the same quality education within the country, that is in India itself. So these are the outlines that NEP focused. And before all of us, we hear from the madam, now I would like to thank all the participants, particularly teachers, professors from different institutions across the country. And we could share this program among all the WhatsApp groups of national level also. So I think all of us will get benefit out of it. So before we start, now I request my colleague, Professor Y.S. Kiranmai, to introduce today's speaker, that is Madam Professor Shakila Shamsuji. Professor Y.S. Kiranmai will present you, Madam. So now I request Professor Y.S. Kiranmai.
Hello, ma'am. Namaste.
Namaste, namaste.
So it's my privilege to introduce. Namaste, ma'am. It's my privilege to introduce Professor Shakila Shamsu to all the participants here. Madam, actually, she mentioned in her CV that she retired in 2020, but you are not looking tired, ma'am. Even I also retired in 2019, but still continuing as a adjunct professor in the department. Madam, actually, she did her PhD in distance education, and happy to share with the group that she is a gold medalist in her PhD. And she did her master's degree in political science, PG diploma in distance education, and also she is a holder of a degree in law. And Professor Shakila, as I mentioned just now, she retired in February 2020 after serving almost 4 decades, of which 25 years in teaching and academics in the universities of Mumbai and Indira Gandhi National Open University, and in education planning and policy for almost 14 years in Government of India. Madam joined the Ministry of Education as OST in New Education Policy in the Department of Higher Education on invitation. Madam was secretary to the committee to draft national education policy and actively contributed to the formulation of NEP 2020. She was also nodal officer of the flagship Government of India scheme of National Mission on Teachers and Teaching, NMTT. Prior to this, Madam was also OST 12th Plan in Ministry of Education on invitation again and Joint Advisor Education in Planning Commission on Deputation. Core areas of interest of Professor Shakila Shamshuji are educational planning, policy making and implementation, tertiary education, faculty development, teacher education, ICT-enabled learning, open and distance learning, and inclusive education. And Madam is very much interested to contribute to the educational planning, policy making, and implementation, promote transformative learning, advise central and state governments on education, and guide higher education institutions to develop ITP and NEP implementation strategies. Her academic contributions and reports are articles. She published a number of articles in international journals and book contributions involved in the preparation of 11th and 12th plans. Several government reports on various aspects of education, addressed in several national and international conferences, and Madam was member of various committees of the Government of India, state governments, UGC, USIEF, national selection committees for Fulbright, etc. And just to name a few awards of Madam are the Leaders of the Decade in Academia Women's Economic Forum, S.P. Mukherjee Commendation on Education, Rethink India, and 100 Muslim Women Honorees in Kerala, RPTC. And the current activities of Ma'am are she is Honorary Advisor Education, Center for Public Policy and Research, Kochi, Member Government Council, India, MUN, and Pan-India UN Body on Climate Action. And Madam is also on advocacy of NEP, online panel discussions, conferences, and webinars. Madam, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and being with us today to share your thoughts on NEP 2020. And as already mentioned by Pawar, NEP has really introduced so many revolutionary changes in Indian education system, like introducing or extending the facility of doing research after 4 years degree, multiple entry, multiple exit, and so many other things as already just mentioned by Pawar. So with this, actually, this is a very brief introduction of Professor Shakila Shamshu, and thank you very much, Madam. Now I'm handing over to Pawar to continue the session. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you and good afternoon to one and all, and greetings to your Honorable Vice Chancellor, Registrar, Finance Officer, and all the senior functionaries, and particularly to Professor Pawar and Professor Kiranmai under the aegis of your Innovation Council and your Department of Commerce and Business Management, where you have invited me as a part of the celebration of the 4-year of National Education Policy 2020 to talk about the transformations that are sort of expected to be unleashed through the National Education Policy. In particular, a few of those points have already been very briefly pointed out by both Professor Pawar and Professor Kiranmai. What I therefore would be trying to do is, when I look at the policy, and for someone who's been a part of that policy making exercise, even if this particular talk is being largely attended by those who are in higher education, we look at education in its totality, right from school education onwards, and therefore it would be very incomplete to talk about a policy only focusing on higher education. Of course, I try and do, because of the if you had to cover both school and higher education in detail, it should be almost about a 4-hour talk, because it is very, very elaborate. But I'll briefly touch upon those aspects of school education which have got implications on higher education, and sensitize all of us to understand that there is an organic linkage between school education and higher education. And so as educators, we should be able to appreciate changes that are happening within the school sector, which help us to make higher education more effective. Now, before I jump into the recommendations, I would like to set a context in the whole exercise of policy making and on the subject of education, and why these changes that have been put forward are almost imperative in today's times and for the future generation. So all of us know, in terms of policy making, that whatever departments the government deals with as its business, So it can be economic policies, industrial policies, trade policies, defense policies, foreign affairs, so many areas. You have policies in all sectors that the government deals with. And that is an ongoing process. It is never a process that stops at any point of time, because policies are brought out at regular intervals in response to certain changes that are happening within the society, the economy, and the globe. So it is never a process which you can say this is the final policy. We'll never have any other policy in this sector. That would never happen. It's an ongoing process. As far as education is concerned, we've had three major policies, and that is not to say that there have not been committees and commissions that have dealt with education. There have been several committees and several commissions which looked on various aspects of education. But as policies, we've had only three major policies, two that came out in the 20th century. And most of us gathered here are beneficiaries of those policies because we had our education during those times, and we started our career in the basis of those two policies. So the 68 and the 86 policy of the 20th century are the ones that made us what we are today. And the policy that came out in 2020 is the first policy of the 21st century. I'm highlighting that for a certain reason. And it has come out nearly 20 years after we entered into this century. Now, as a generation, the bulk of us sitting over here have possibly not taken cognizance of the fact that as a generation, we are very blessed to see two centuries, both the 20th and the 21st century. The bulk of the students coming to us who are 19-year-olds or 18-year-olds, in the case of open universities, we have a little higher age group that comes, but the bulk that comes to the regular face-to-face are children born in this century. And in that sense, the teachers are those who came out from the previous century and dealing with a clientele that has come out in this century. And that is why when we look at the recommendations of this policy, to be convinced as educators about the changes and the move from structured systems to flexible systems, this becomes very important. So in terms of trying to say that the 2020 policy is very transformative and it is not just reformative, we mean to say that the reforms are not merely tinkering changes or very minor changes from what has been going on. It has completely transformed many ways in terms of structures, processes, and the way in which we conduct the entire teaching learning process. But the primary part of it, or the most fundamental, is that from a structured system of education, we have moved towards a more flexible system of education. And to use a very cliche term, which we've been doing it for the last decades, saying that we became learner-directed or learner-centric. And actually that has been enabled largely by the recommendations of this policy. We've been using that term in a very, as if it has happened, but it has not really happened, because when you say it's learner-centered or it is learner-directed, it is the learner which is the fulcrum of the entire decision-making process. The combination of courses, the medium of instruction, the manner in which pedagogies need to be carried out, and so on. So in terms of saying that this policy of the 21st century, two things also that I may like to say: never mix politics with policy, because policies are independent of politics. And therefore, as educators, we are not people representing political parties. As educators, let us remain objective in terms of detaching ourselves from the politics and the policy as it is. The second is that never make an assumption. You can compare policies, but never make an assumption that an 86 policy was better than a 68 policy, or that the 2020 policy is better than an 86 policy. Because as I said, policies are documents which respond to changes, and therefore there is no gap filling or there is no remedying anything that was wrong in a previous policy. That policy at that point of time was appropriate then in that situation. And therefore, as I said, all of us here are beneficiaries of both the 68 and the 86 policy. And therefore, while the policy may not have been implemented in its entirety, which is a reality, because a study tells us, an analysis of policies across the world, education policies, that only 40%, only 1 in 7 policies, forget the percentage, 1 in 7 policies get implemented to a very large extent. So even our 68 policy or the 86 policy may not have been implemented. I'll give you an example of that. Core recommendations may not have been implemented. And even as we talk about this particular policy, Professor Pawar mentioned that we have not made it mandatory for state governments to do that. But while saying that, a policy is a national policy, and therefore it remains a recommendatory policy which state government should be willing to take on, because as a subject of education, it is within the concurrent list, and it is not a subject in the central list or in the state list, but it is one in which both the central and the state come together in a federating setup to implement the policy. So the policy, how you contextualize it regionally, and because it is a federal setup, you need to respect that each state government brings out its own regulations so that it implements the policy. So every state government, I think, is in the progress. It's a work in progress, ongoing, where they are trying to implement the policy's recommendations to the best extent that suits their own regional context. And that is something that we need to respect, the state's approach to implementing a policy. So while UGC as a body has brought out the regulations of the 4-year undergraduate program, on internationalization, on multiple entry and exit, on preparing an institutional development plan, you have all the guidelines. Similarly, the school department has brought out a Samarth, which is an implementation plan. But for schools, state governments are very, very much clued in, because most of the funding that happens in the schools is on a center state sharing funding pattern. Whereas higher education institutions, we derive our funds from the UGC and largely are autonomous as compared to the school sector. Now, while saying that, therefore, for the higher education, most of the state governments are trying to sync their academics in line with the NEP recommendations, but they are at varying stages of progress. Now, coming to the other 2 or 3 factors before I talk about the recommendations, why did this particular policy that came out in 2020 put forward recommendations that are of this nature? 3 basic drivers of change, and that is very, very important for us to understand. One is that when you look at education in the ecosystem of education, you look at a construct of knowledge and you look at the construct of learning. So it is knowledge that we are passing on to the younger generation. That knowledge, as it was in the 20th century, and knowledge as it is in the 21st century, has changed. What do I mean by that? The concept of knowledge in a given discipline was seen as if it was very exclusive by nature. It was not inclusive by nature. That is, if I'm learning social sciences, or let us say sociology or physics or chemistry, that it existed to the exclusion of other disciplines. And there was something intrinsically that was only sociology or only physics or only chemistry. And that led to the idea that disciplinary boundaries are very hard and that there is no interconnectedness across disciplines. Whereas over the turn of the century, you had eminent thinkers, including in India, our own Professor Yashpalji, who mentioned that knowledge is porous. That is, it is when it is porous, when something is porous, there is seepage that is happening. And therefore, there is interconnectedness that happens. That resulted in new notions of disciplines and knowledge, which moved from disciplinary to multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary. So the recognition of the multidimensionality of knowledge disciplines as not being insular by nature, but being interconnected, made it mandatory for us to take cognizance that the knowledge itself has metamorphosed from what it was in the 20th century to what it is in the 21st century. So to ignore that would be as if you are completely not taking account of the fact that an education system recognizes the interconnectedness of knowledge disciplines. Just as that we talk about knowledge, when we talk about learning also, we are talking about not just a unidimensional understanding of learning, but that learning has 4 pillars. And some of you who deal with teacher education are very well versed with what was stated in the Delors Commission report, which talks about the 4 pillars of learning, which is learning to know, which is the cognitive part of it. The learning to know is the theoretical, the cognitive, the conceptual, factual, that kind of knowledge is learning to know. And most of us as teachers, largely in our classroom situations, are trying to disseminate that cognitive knowledge to our students, the theoretical, the conceptual, and so on. The second pillar of learning that became more prominent at the turn of the century is learning to do, which is the skills, the experiential, the practical, and the problem solving, which has to be integrated with the learning to know. The third pillar of learning in a context of sustainable development is the third is of learning to live together and to live with others, leading to the ideas of sustainable development, climate change, peace education, universal human values to create sustainable societies, and recognizing the fact that no learning happens in war-torn societies or in strife-driven societies. And the last pillar of learning, which is actually the foundation on which the National Education Policy 2020 is based upon, is learning to be. Learning to be is merely a recognition that a class of 60 students is not one monolith, but that 60 living souls are people with their own abilities, talents, and aspirations. And it means that you cannot address a class of students as if they were identical of one another. And that has led to the concept of individualization and customization and providing flexible pathways and multiple trajectories. So the learning to be, along with the other 3 pillars of learning, also makes it a complete holistic approach to teaching and learning, where you need to combine cognitive with skills, with sustainability, and take into account individual talents and think of optimizing every individual's talent, whether they are poor learners, average learners, good at maths, good at science, good at dance, good at music, whatever. Every living person has a talent which is not identical, and that an education system must recognize and nurture that talent to optimize it for the benefit of that individual's holistic development. The third driver of change is the advent of disruptive technologies. So while all of us coming from the previous century are cognizant that computers and the internet put us all on an information superhighway where things were synchronously passed across time and space at a tremendous speed, and it resulted in ease of doing many things which was not possible earlier. The rise of disruptive technologies is both an opportunity and a challenge. Robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all these are challenging the kind of job profiles that will come about in future. And we must be very, very mindful that the threat of disruptive technologies is that machine intelligence cannot start dominating human intelligence. So the 3 drivers of change, which has resulted in NEP's recommendations, are the construct of knowledge metamorphosis, learning being multidimensional, and the onset of disruptive technologies which are changing the job profiles. Now, these 3, in the context of what education is, why are we educating our children? We are educating them so that they are equipped with the kind of knowledge, skills, capabilities, competencies, and attitudes that make them productive individuals. That is the ultimate goal, so that they are productive in contributing to their own economic development, societal development, the political development, the national growth and development, and to become what we call truly global citizens, 21st century global citizens. If we have to do that, we cannot continue with an education system which is very structured and which is not learner directed, but which is teacher centric or institution centric. It is the learner who has to be at the essence of all the decisions that come about. So it means that the need for individualization, the need for customization, the need for flexibility is not a luxury that we can have. It is necessary, essential, mandatory, imperative if we want our students to become productive individuals. So if any of us have any doubts about this change, we must be convinced as educators that it is not, therefore, the way I learned and the way people in our generation learned cannot be the way in which our students can learn, because when we learned that, we were not being prepared for times when knowledge was seen in multidisciplinary manner, when learning was multidimensional, and where technologies were threatening the jobs that were conventionally available. Just to say, suppose as teachers today, you say you won't use technology and you won't go in for online, then you will find that you are no longer relevant at all. I commonly give a very anecdotal, or a rather very simple kind of an example as to why the dinosaur became extinct. It's because of its inability to adapt to changes. And we as teachers don't want to become dinosaurs ourselves. Neither do we want our students to become dinosaurs. They must be relevant to the times within which they are living. So it is this context. Now, coming to the policy, we looked at education in one single organic continuum. And now I would just for a moment, if we reflect upon ourselves, as your own children or your own grandchildren or yourself, when you were doing your education and your learning, did it matter to us whether I'm in a school or a college? It doesn't, because learning happens continuously for us. It is the institutions that may vary, or even in terms of administrative functionality, you may say there is a school administration, there is a department of school administration, but learning happens in an organic continuum. As far as the learner's learning trajectory is concerned, what he achieves in higher levels of learning, he or she achieves in higher, is greatly determined to the manner in which the school education has happened. That interconnectedness. Therefore, the interconnectedness between the subsectors of education, school education, that is primary level, the elementary level, the secondary levels as we understand, and the higher education, are all in an interconnected manner. So the policy looked at education in one large continuum, and within that we covered the sectors of school and higher. In school, we put a new idea of a paradigm shift from the 10+2 to a other shift to the 5+3+3+4, and talked about higher education with a flexibility of a 3-year, 4-year program. And we covered open and distance learning, vocational education, teacher education. We looked at adult education, cross-cutting themes of technology and education, language and education, research and innovation, governance and regulation, internationalization. All these aspects taken together have been the recommendations. As Professor Pawar mentioned, the committee's report of 484 pages was crystallized on the basis of suggestions we got on the feedback to that report to a crisp document of 66 pages where all these areas have been covered. Now, as I said, instead of talking in detail about school, I just want to sort of let you know about the 5+3+3+4, and to also mention why that paradigm becomes essential. Firstly, we are not talking about a physical restructuring. We are talking in terms of a restructuring in approach to curricula and pedagogy from the point of view, as I said, of helping the learner so that they are able to learn in a developmentally appropriate manner. And we know that the theories of education tell us that learning happens in an age appropriate manner. So when we look at the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, we are talking about schooling from age 3 to age 18 in that spectrum. And the first 5 years, 3 to 8, form the foundational, 8 to 11 forms the preparatory, 11 to 14 forms the middle stage, and 14 to 18 forms the secondary stage. Now, the emphasis on the 3 to 6 as being a part of the foundational with a very strong recommendation for a very robust early childhood care and education is the mainstay of this report, because we have clearly written in one line that if we cannot focus on early childhood care and education, it is unlikely that future rewards in education will be derived by an individual. Meaning to say that a child who has not had proper foundational learning through early childhood care and education is unlikely to perform better and achieve learning outcomes as the child goes ahead in the learning trajectory. That is the emphasis and the importance that we are giving. Now, the reason why we made it important for us to talk about early childhood care and education is based on empirical evidence, which tells us that neurologically, the brain development that happens between the ages of 0 to 6. And 95% of the neural networks in our brain get connected in that age group. And earlier, we were starting with age 6 at class 1, age 5 at class 1, where actually that child, those who are coming from well-to-do families, went to preschools, play schools, and so on. And the bulk of India's children who went to Anganwadis did not really get the benefit of preparedness of learning. So there was a learning divide at the beginning itself. Those who came in with a preschool and a play school background with some element of early childhood care education were able to acquire foundational numeracy and literacy skills, what we called as the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic. And that child who comes from an Anganwadi system, which is the bulk of what India's children come from, they are not able to assimilate the basics because they have not had their neural development of the brain. So that is basically what deficit we are trying to remedy by talking about a robust early childhood care and education. So I am not dwelling much upon the Anganwadi system, and with all due respect, the Anganwadis have done extremely well in terms of the ICDS program for the maternal health, the early childhood nutrition, and so on. So both child mortality and maternal mortality reduced, and infant mortality reduced because of the Anganwadi system and the integrated child development scheme, which is globally accepted as one of the largest schemes that has resulted in our health indices going up substantially through the National Family Health Surveys that have come out. But it is the education part which was not a focus in the Anganwadi system, and that had resulted in this kind of a learning divide. So rather than saying that those who are rich and those who can afford will come in with that, and the rest need not come in, we put a level playing field where we said all children will get this foundational stage between the ages of 3 to 8. And we said that the class 1 starts at age 6, so that you have 3 years of early learning that happens. And that learning at the 3 to 6 is not formal learning. Please understand that. It is joy-based learning. It is playway-based learning, because children should not be formally introduced to pencil and paper at that age. They need to draw connections. They need to start doing it creatively. If I may say it very, very poignantly, it is to say that the power of curiosity that the child has at that stage, and the power of, let us say, creativity that that child has at that stage, must be encouraged to flower and develop through a number of creative activities, which are rather joyful activities. And rather than looking at learning as a burden, instill the joy of learning in the child, so that that joy of learning actually helps them to look at the whole learning experience with more of encouragement, more of affection, and therefore they feel the school is not a space where they need to cry to come to school. They should be happy to be in that learning space. We are all actually, in a certain sense, we have killed the joy of learning. And that is why children are scared. I mean, a child being taken to a school, I can understand for the first 3 days, first 1 week, so on. But why does the child does not like to come to school after that? It's because there is a lot of pressure, there is a lot of stress. The joy of learning is not really being inculcated. So the ECCE in the 3 to 6, with the class 1 and the class 2, looking at foundational literacy and numeracy, is trying to put up a kind of a education which will make education for all sections of the society being of an equal level, rather than creating a learning divide and bridge the learning deficit that the bulk of our children. So all of you read ACER reports, scathing reports. 5-year-old, the fifth standard child does not know second standard counting and so on. That happens. Rather than looking at that problem, it is for us to understand why that kind of data has come out. And that needs to be remedied. So it comes because of this learning deficit and this learning divide. So that is the first 5 years, which is very critical. And going further, we talk about age appropriate developmental learning, which is between 8 to 11 at the preparatory level, where there is initiation into formal learning, moving away from play-based methods to formal learning. And then middle stage is where the bulk of the change is happening. So between the ages of 11 to 14, what we had in our schools, the demarcation of subjects as curricular subjects, extracurricular subjects, co-curricular subjects, and hard separations with no credits and weightage being given to drawing or painting or extracurricular activities, that has completely been done away with. And so what we are saying in the middle stage, that is from class 6 onwards, we are saying that all subjects will carry weightage. You remember what I said, learning to be. Someone may be good at math, someone may be good at music, someone may be good at cricket, somebody may be good at painting. All these are talents that reside in children. And all these needs to be nurtured. And you cannot create a hierarchy of disciplines where you put math, science, languages at a higher order and reduce social sciences, dramatics, and maybe sports to a lower level. All stand in its own right. And that is the leveling that we need to have. And that is why curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular is done away with. And all of them will be given weightage, marks and credits for activities done, which would mean that you would have to have pedagogies which shift from rote-based learning, where we are only testing memory, to moving towards more innovative pedagogies, where we give children a lot of activities, where we encourage them to do a lot of problem solving, rational thinking, scientific temper. So the shift from rote-based learning to more innovative pedagogies that allow children to actually have their individual talents coming out and their higher order thinking skills being developed and so-called 21st century skills coming into being will all happen with the pedagogical reforms, both in the classroom transactions, off classroom transactions, the way you assess the students, both for your internal as well as for your summative evaluation. And that is carried forward into the secondary stage. And in the middle school stage, if I may mention, we are talking of introducing subjects which are having vocational exposure. We are talking of 10 days bagless for schools so that children intern with craftsmen and local skills are sort of respected and understood by them. And at the same time, technology-wise, we are talking of introducing coding and so on, so that it's a combination of both skills, technology, research-oriented approaches for problem solving and so on, all bundled together between these classes of 6 to 8. Coming to the secondary stage, the policy had recommended 4 new curricula. One is the National Curriculum Framework for Early Childhood Care and Education. The other is the Curriculum Framework for School Education. Based on that, the National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education, and finally the Curriculum Framework for Adult Education. As of now, we've had the Curriculum Framework for ECCE and School Education coming out. And since both the School Education has come out, ECCE gets merged within School Education. And in that secondary stage, we are saying that all students will be exposed to 8 curricular areas. It is not that one will be taking maths, so they will not learn languages or they will not learn social. So mathematics education, language education, science education, social science education, arts education, physical education and well-being, vocational education, all of them together along with interdisciplinary areas are to be covered between classes 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, so that every child gets a smattering of exposure to all these 8 curricular areas in keeping with the idea of holistic development. Now, before I get into higher education, it is this part which is actually translating to the idea of holistic and multidisciplinary. Just to set on record that the policy talked about 5 goals which are articulated: access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. Now, these 5 goals are running throughout the NEP recommendations. And all aspects, we never had recommendations which contradict one another. And that consistency was also maintained because in the very first chapter, we have highlighted 22 cardinal principles. These cardinal principles draw on all the recommendations, are drawn by all the recommendations that have covered school education, higher education, teacher education, and so on. Now, in higher education, if you remember what I said, the 3 drivers of change, that knowledge is multidisciplinary, that learning is multidimensional, and that technology is a reality and challenging the kind of job profiles. The current pattern of our undergraduate education, which is BA, BCom, BSc, BBA, BTech, BSc Nursing, MBBS, all in pharmacy, agriculture, law, and so on, silo-based degrees. These silo-based degrees cannot remain in a context where knowledge has become multidisciplinary. So the undergraduate education is seeing the largest number of changes. And as far as the non-technical and non-professional degrees, we are saying that it is a flexible, integrated, holistic, multidisciplinary 3-year, 4-year undergraduate program. It is modular, it is flexible, it has the option of exit and re-entry, and it combines a number of courses which will give students a very holistic and integrated and multidisciplinary exposure. And this is where the largest change is happening. And even those state governments who, for political reasons, did not want to embrace the national education policy are also undertaking these same reforms in their own nomenclature. So be it, because you cannot have students in one part of a region being subjected to disadvantage when nationally you have a different pattern of education. So what is this 3-year, 4-year undergraduate program? So we are talking about 6 categories of courses, very different from what we did. And that's why I make this comment in faculty development programs that as a teacher, I must take an oath to myself that I will not teach my students the way my teachers taught me. Because my teacher taught me at a time when knowledge was insular, when learning was unidimensional, and where there was no threat of technologies. But I respect my teacher for all the values of integrity, dedication, determination, compassion, and so on that has been instilled in me. And therefore, those remain with me. But if I need to be relevant and effective and achieve learning outcomes and want my learners to become productive individuals, I will teach them in the manner that is making them future ready and therefore instilling in them all those requirements which make them multi-skilled and multi-competent. So the 4-year program, as we look at, the conventional idea was that we take up papers only in 1 or 2 disciplines. Here we are talking about 6 categories of courses. There are common courses, core disciplinary courses, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary or elective courses, ability enhancement courses, skill enhancement courses, and value-added courses. So these 6 categories on one side will negate a criticism that we are making students jack of all trades and master of none, which has been a very common criticism to this structure. Let me clarify that. When you talk about the core discipline, that is exactly where you are having the disciplinary depth. But you are not undermining that disciplinary depth when you add on to your collection of knowledge in various other disciplines. Because today, what does the economy look for in a graduate? All of us sitting here are what is conventionally described as I-shaped graduates. Alphabet I, which only has depth, whereas the employer today is looking at a T-shaped graduate. There is not only depth, but there is also breadth of exposure and multiple skill sets and multiple competencies because of those drivers of changes and because of the threat of job profiles changing with disruptive technologies. Now, it is this factor that has resulted in this kind of an array of courses where earlier, if a student is joining an undergraduate program, the student was forced to take up only in one discipline 6 subjects of sociology or physics or chemistry or mechanical engineering, which was not, may have learned a smattering of some foundation course, some language, but that all got over in the first year and there was no other exposure in subsequent years. Whereas that cannot be done now because of the imperativeness of why they need to become T-shaped graduates. So there are common courses, core courses, which are core disciplinary courses, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary or open electives, ability enhancement, skill enhancement, and value added. The common courses by nature are interdisciplinary courses in the sense that in a calendar, in a college or a university, you won't find in the timetable any of the common courses. Problem solving skills, communication skills, research skills, digital skills. These are common courses which are largely reflective of what we call are the 21st century skills. Collaborative learning, analytical skills, problem solving skills, these are all common courses. As a teacher, whether I teach history or whether I teach chemistry or whether I teach mechanical engineering, I need to weave common courses into my curricular transaction so that I give children opportunities for problem solving, analytical skills, developing rational thought, scientific temper, all those skills. Along with that, knowledge of constitution, meaning largely the constitutional duties, understanding the environment, sensitivity to gender, Indian knowledge systems, universal human values. Now, some universities, and as per our articulation in the guidelines also, we have said that 1 or 2 courses like universal human values or Indian knowledge systems or environment can have credits. That can be 4 credits or 2 credits or so on. Wherever credits are earmarked, you will have to have classes for them. So bulk of the universities who opted for universal human values or environment or Indian knowledge system have earmarked classes with a fixed curricula to be covered in that course for which credits will be acquired by the students. So that's your common courses. The core discipline is what all of us understand, that as a student, when I join an undergraduate program, that I want to learn economics, or I want to do something in English language, or I want to learn mechanical engineering, or I want to learn jurisprudence, or I want to learn criminal law, or I want to learn nursing, or I want to learn medicine, whatever. That is your core discipline. Now, that is where we are stipulating in a 3-year program that a student should acquire minimum 48 credits. It is 40 credits per year, accumulating to 120 if it's 3-year and 160 if it is a 4-year program. And under the 120 3-year program, the core area in which you're going to get your specialization, the minimum benchmark or the cutoff we are saying is 48 credits. You can go beyond that. We are only saying that you must get that minimum 48 credits. If it is 160 credits, we are saying it has to be 64 credits. Now, this is the core area that you cover. The next to that is your multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, or elective. That has to be, if it is a social science subject, it has to be a non-social science subject. You cannot say I took economics as my core and learned sociology as my interdisciplinary. No way. You can be economics as your core or commerce as your core, and you learn sociology, or you learn, let us say, mechanical engineering, or you learn pharmacy, or you learn law, or you learn agriculture, but it has to be other than your core area. And when we say the interdisciplinary, it can be music, it can be dramatics, it can be digital writing, anything. I mean, it has to be other than the core discipline. The next is ability enhancement, which are language-based courses. So why we introduced ability enhancement has a little bit of background to be given. Independent India offered higher education only in English medium. You do your graduation, PG, doctoral, only in English medium. That was a colonial hangover that we had. And we all understand the advantages of speaking an English language. Having said that, India's linguistic pluralism is something that is almost mind-boggling, and the entire world looks at it with awe. You have 22 languages listed in the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution. But as far as the number of languages spoken in India, it runs to as many as 200 languages. And languages without script or dialects, we are home to as many as 1,680 dialects. This is the diversity of India's linguistic heritage that we have. Now, in that context, when school education is offered through regional languages, and India being largely an agrarian country, many do not come into higher education because it is offered only in English. So English acts as a deterrent to achieve inclusion within higher education. So to increase our gross enrollment ratio from the current 28.1 to reach 50%, that is from 44 million students to reach somewhere around 80 million students, you cannot have higher education confined to be offered only in English medium. So we said that you will offer higher education in regional language. There are challenges, no doubt about that. The challenges come because we as teachers speak multiple languages, but are have the ability and the adeptness only to transact the curriculum in English language. So we need to become bilingual. We should have reading materials, the reference materials. So there is a translation mission which is taking care of that. It is a question of our own teachers becoming more capacitated and sort of having that kind of develop that capacities to take a bilingual teaching initially. And then maybe you can offer it in regional languages also. So if B.R. Ambedkar Open University would like to offer it, which you must be already doing in Telugu, it should be also there for those who are going into the regular colleges, that they may not join an open university, but may join a regular university, and that option should be made available. So since we said this as a part of equity, as a part of inclusion, as a part of enhancing access to higher education, ability enhancement courses are all language courses. They are all increasing the abilities of students to develop functional knowledge in various languages. It can be English, it can be Telugu, it can be Sanskrit, it can be Urdu, it can be Malayalam, it can be Gujarati, any language. So depending upon the demand, ability enhancement courses are all language ability courses. Skill enhancement, I told you the second pillar of learning. And talking about skills, the kind of skill sets that we are talking is not to make children plumbers or electricians or masons. Skill education has completely revolutionized in the context of technology, in the context of the MSME sector. And you're looking at courses that range from logistics management, supply chain management, blockchain management, cold chain management, retail management, hospitality sector, health sector, many areas that is getting covered, as many as 100 courses. Since your program is under the aegis of AICT, look at the list of 99 courses listed on the AICT website, which deals with skill enhancement courses. Digital marketing, these are all very modern level courses integrating technology, and which our students, if they do, since job profiles change, it is possible that some of these courses might hold them in good stead when there is an uncertain job scenario that they are facing. And the last set is the value-added courses. The value-added courses are those courses that are new and emerging areas. With the dynamic changes that are happening, there is a lot of demand that is coming in for design thinking, coming in for digital marketing, for Internet of Things, for coding, for robotics, and so on. And even in media studies, journalism, media studies, these are all new emerging areas. All of us know that today, bulk of us are looking at non-print media with going through the YouTube and seeing the channels like the Wire channel and so on, which are all the new forms of media covering all the latest news that is happening. So media is up for a lot of changes, and there we need to be abreast with that. So also in the field of entertainment, animation, digital animation, multimedia animation, all those are having a lot of job opportunities that are coming up. Now, this combination of 6 courses with 40 credits per year, with a mandatory internship that has been added on, that every undergraduate student, not those who are engineering, not just management students, every undergraduate student will do mandatorily an internship, which is to bridge the gap between the world of education and the world of work. If industry is telling us that 40% of our graduates are unemployable, it is not a joke that we can afford to ignore. Why are they unemployable? Because they were safely in a comfort zone of a college, but they did not develop their collaborative skills. They did not go out, collect data, speak to people, understand how group dynamics operate, how to manage time, how to manage stress, and so on. So internships require that gap to be addressed, and it is mandatory that a student does internship. If that student wants to take a break in the first year, then that internship must be completed in the very first year itself. I'll come to that in a while. So when we talk about this program, we give an exit option, with exit option in the first year, second year, and third year. And when we give this exit option, this must be made very clear that you are entitled to a certification. You are entitled to get a UG certificate at the end of first year, a UG diploma at the end of the second year, a bachelor's at the end of the third year. And a student is free to exit the undergraduate, not in the technical courses like engineering and medicine and so on, in the non-technical areas, the general tertiary education. That student can exit an undergraduate program at the end of the third year and not go in for the fourth year, and that is acceptable. But when exiting and wanting a certification, we must ensure that the student has completed that internship. If the student otherwise exits, the credits will be retained, but they will not be entitled to get a certificate, and that we should discourage as far as possible. Now, how is this possible to give this kind of an option? We are giving this kind of an option because of 3 instrumentalities. One is the Academic Bank of Credit, which is a digital storehouse of academic credits, where a student onboards onto it through the DigiLocker account with an APAR ID, which is a authenticated personal academic authentication registration number, and the institution onboards onto it through the ABC platform. And therefore, all credits earned by the student is digitally stored with the exit option that we are giving, where we are talking about that multiple entry and exit guidelines, where a student can take a break and complete it within a 7-year window. So the window, if you don't complete it in the continuous 3 years or 4 years, you are not a dropout and not a failure, which is what we do conventionally today. And we ask a student taking a break to redo and repeat all the courses that was covered. Let us say a student is doing a 3-year BA program and the student takes a break at the end of the first year and cannot complete it. After 5 years wants to do that, that first year, whatever the student does is a complete washout because no credits are given for that has been completed, which is what we have tried to surmount. To some extent, open universities already have these kind of flexibilities. So I've always believed that the open university system has been a forerunner to many of the NEP recommendations because we weave into our open university system and the ODL system a lot of these flexibilities by pacing out their period of study, their extended duration, and so on, without having to lose out on what has already been covered. Now we are bringing it into the bulk of the general education, and that itself is a major, major transformation. So having taken that, one is the ABC, one is the National Higher Education Qualification Framework, and the National Credit Framework. These three instrumentalities make it possible for us to allow for lateral entry and exit from ITIs and polytechnics into mainstream, from open and distance learning into mainstream, and give credits across school education to higher education. And the NHUQF establishes the equivalence of courses across universities. So today I am doing it from a university in Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, and I go to Maharashtra or Gujarat or Delhi, my credits earned are seamlessly carried forward into the other institutions without trying to have any paperwork in terms of equivalence, because the NHEQF has established that equivalence. Now, when giving this option of exit and entry, it is very important to conduct very elaborate, comprehensive induction meetings where newly admitted students, along with their parents, must be invited. One of the major stumbling blocks is coming with the attitudinal block of parents who wonder, this is not the way that we had studied, and why is that student being allowed to do this? So they need to be sensitized and they need to be made clear that these changes are not being done to put the student into inconvenience. Rather, it is in the favor of the student going forward to help that student to undertake lifelong learning and constant upgradation of skills. Now, some of the aspects where this flexibility gets even more, one is that they choose across a combination of courses. They have a longer duration, but there is still more flexibility that comes in because most of our colleges, unlike open universities like your own and many other open universities, where we have all departments being there, we have normal colleges, which are arts college or commerce college or science college or management colleges or engineering colleges or medicine colleges or teacher education colleges. They don't offer all the disciplines. Very few comprehensive universities have that. So how did we think that we can give multidisciplinary options? So we said that we need to transform single discipline higher education institutions to become multidisciplinary by entering into collaborative arrangements, which are formalized MOUs entered into between two or more institutions so as to make multidisciplinary offerings a reality. The next flexibility we have given, and which UGC allows, in all general education, up to 40% of the credits can be done through open and distance learning or through MOOCs courses. That is where we as open universities need to capture our catchment clientele. That is, students who are going into regular universities, if our universities, as an example that I can give, not many universities in Maharashtra may offer agriculture, but Yeshwantrao Chauhan Maharashtra Open University has a very strong department of agriculture, and many students can take up Open University courses in agriculture within that ambit of that 40% credits that can come, and there it becomes even multidisciplinary because that is not your core subject and you are doing it in agriculture as a minor elective. So here is where the third flexibility comes in terms of the modes of learning. The person is learning face to face as well as through open universities or through massive open online courses offered through the Swayam platform of AICTE Ministry of Education. So these flexibilities across courses, across modes of learning, across institutions with an exit option, and all of it being digitally stored with the exit option of being 3 years or 4 years. Coming back to that, the student who has completed third year and wants to go into the fourth year has two options, where in the fourth year they can go on with the coursework, and that if they've done 64 credits, they are getting it with honors, and therefore they can take honors or majors in 2 majors and a couple of minors. Or the next option is in the 7th and the 8th semester, they do a research project, and that entitles them with an honors with research. Now, if you are a 3 years bachelor's, you don't get an honors, you get a specialization, which can be called as your major. But if you do the fourth year, you get it with honors. And if you do it with research, you're doing it with bachelor's with honors and research. The 3-year student will do 2 years of master's under the revised PG program, which is also modular and which is also multidisciplinary. And the 4-year bachelor's with honors will do a 1-year master's, and the 4-year bachelor's with research is entitled to join a PhD program directly. This is the arrangement which provides for multiple pathways and multiple flexibility. So since we focused on the aspect of holistic education, we have said that colleges and universities must provide avenues for students' holistic development by allowing opportunities for eco clubs, debating clubs, youth clubs, sports activities, and a number of these. And along with career counseling, we should have psychological counseling to look at the social and mental health and the emotional well-being of our students. The role of the teacher obviously gets completely metamorphosed in this process because I'm not there more as a knowledge disseminator, which today the student has access to the internet, but I'm there more as a mentor, as a friend, as a philosopher, as a motivator, and someone who is enabling that student as a facilitator to undertake that learning activity in an outcome-based learning environment. So the emphasis in higher education has shifted from the merely acquisition of a degree through rote learning, through outcome-based education, where you are looking at learning outcomes in terms of knowledge acquired, understanding of a subject, skills that come with it, and the competencies that go with it. So every higher education faculty has to have a lesson plan where you are disaggregating or you are sort of breaking down your core content into these 4 aspects of learning outcomes and creating our classrooms not as passive rooms where students do not open their mouth at all, but they are actively participating in group discussions, oral presentations, role plays, field surveys, many activities, so that you are creating what we call active learning environments. Only when we create active learning environments, there is greater learner participation and 3 types of learner engagement: learner to learner engagement, learner to content engagement, and learner to teacher engagement. These 3 are very, very critical in the overall, let us say, assimilation of higher order thinking skills and having a very effective outcome-based education, which will largely help students to become employable and be able to get relevant jobs relating to their own education and their skills. Now, this having been said, the NEP 2020, since we are talking about transformations, cannot be confined to only the undergraduate program. And so the policy has also emphasized and reinvigorated, if I may say, both vocational education and open and distance learning. So open and distance learning came in for a major boost, that they can take up teacher education programs, they can offer vocational courses, they can offer courses which have practicals, provided all the quality inputs required are provided by an open university system. But for that, we have said quality assurance becomes very important, and therefore all parameters for quality assurance accreditation have been put in place. We have also said that vocational education needs to come in. And so when we articulated a GER target of 50%, we have said that a certain specific number comes in from the vocational stream so that skills are given its due importance. So also for open and distance learning, we have said that they will also be contributing at least a certain percentage on that enrollment will come in through vocational education and through distance education. Now, in the architecture of higher education, since our higher education system is the largest in the world, 1,200 universities, 47,000 affiliated colleges, 17,000 standalone, 13,000 standalone institutions, we said in the policy, let us identify institutions not by their source of funding, which we say centrally funded institutions, state funded institutions, deemed universities, private universities, unitary universities, affiliating universities, open universities, and so on. We said you look at it from the function, and that architecture we suggested is teaching intensive universities, research intensive universities, or teaching and research combined together to become multidisciplinary education and research universities. And the major reform is in the affiliation system. I think all of us as educators who've been doing research for years on end would remember that we've been always talking about looking at affiliating reforms and to reduce the number of affiliated colleges. And that is where exactly we have said that over a 15-year period, maybe by 2035 or 2040, that we move towards a system of graded autonomy to have degree granting autonomous colleges. Now, let me not for a moment give you this impression that 47,000 colleges will become 47,000 degree granting colleges. No way. Many of them would become a part. They may sometimes convert to become teaching intensive universities. Some would come together to become a form of a cluster university. And only from the point of view of equity and inclusion, we would allow a few of these colleges to remain affiliated in geographically inaccessible, tribal, hilly, island areas where it is possible that they cannot think of becoming a degree granting autonomous college. So this long reform that we are looking at and this transformation in the character of higher education institution is accompanied by an instrumentality where we have recommended that every HEI will prepare an institutional development plan, which is nothing but a strategic plan of action envisioning for itself where it would like to see itself going forward. As a college, do I want to become a degree granting college? As a college, which is already a college with potential for excellence, can I become a teaching intensive university? As a teaching intensive university, can I go on to become a multidisciplinary education and research university? So the floor has been sort of kept open with multiple options. Each institution makes its own self-analysis through a SWOT analysis and then works out a strategic plan with key performance indicators, keeping the 5 goals of access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. On equity and inclusion, we covered it both in chapter 6 and 14 of the NEP, one for school education and one for higher education. But suffice it to say in a very short way that it tried to look at socially and economically disadvantaged groups as an umbrella term to include the SCs, STs, OBCs, religious and linguistic minorities, women, transgenders, children from vulnerable sections, migrant labor, urban poor, children with disabilities, children with learning disabilities, all to come together with facilities of special education zones, gender inclusion funds, social inclusion funds, enhanced scholarships and freeships to be provided by both public funded and private institutions, access devices, hostels, transportation facilities, and many such measures. While these are all there on paper, I must at the same time say with a deep sense of pain that many of these are not really getting translated on ground, and therefore education, particularly higher education, still remains for many an unaffordable asset that they may want to acquire. On research and innovation, we talked about setting up a fund for research, and that is already passed by the parliament. The National Research Foundation that has been created under the Prime Minister's Scientific Advisory Council, which is called the Rashtriya Anusandhan Fund, kind of, which is to propel research culture at undergraduate education. And you're aware that the research funding in our country is low. The number of our higher education institutions are focusing largely on teaching and not on research. And to give that all an impetus and make India come up in the global rankings, why we don't come up in QS rankings or Times rankings or Shanghai rankings is because our higher education institutions do not have a lot of research contributions. And the research funding was also a deficit that we fed. So the NRF will propel a culture of undergraduate education, creating academia industry interfaces, innovation clubs like your own Innovation Council, also helping children to come in touch with research laboratories. And NRF can provide the seed money so that you germinate culture of research at the undergraduate education. And in the same sense, promoting not just innovation through hackathons and so on, but incubation centers and startups, encourage entrepreneurial qualities also through the startups and so on. So job seekers and job creators, both being provided with a kind of a canvas where higher education institutions should give impetus and encouragement to all these skills. We are talking in terms of a lot of governance and regulatory reforms. Largely, I would only like to say for internal governance, we are talking about an empowered board of governors, which is supposed to be a very collegiate body representative, not just of the senior management, but also the educated, academicians, the scientific community, the civil society, teacher representatives, student representatives, parent representatives, local body representatives, with minimal governmental or bureaucratic interference. The idea is to keep higher education institutions, academic institutions, which nurture an academic ecosystem and an academic ethos. And for that reason, the Empowered Board of Governors is a self-elected within the college body itself that is created. And the IDP, as I said, would be the strategic plan of action going forward. On the regulation, we have talked about a major overhauling of the regulatory system, 17 regulatory councils, the UGC, the AICT, the Pharmacy Council, the National Council for Teacher Education, the National Medical Commission, the Bar Council, all of them across various, these councils concede their regulatory authorities to the new body that we want to create, that is the National Higher Education Regulatory Council, the NAC, which is the National Accreditation Council, subsuming NAAC and NBA to be a super accreditor. The UGC and the AICT, their acts will become null and void. So there is there will be this Higher Education Grants Council will take care of funding, and the UGC would become like a General Education Council taking care of academic standard setting, along with NCT, AICT, which become professional standard setting bodies. So the regulatory reform is the separation of powers of funding, regulation, standard setting, and accreditation to be given to 4 independent verticals under a new umbrella architecture called the Higher Education Commission of India. But that is still work in progress, because though the Honorable Finance Minister mentioned it in 2 of her budget speeches, it has still not become a reality, and that coming in through a legislative exercise is still in the works. So as of now, all our guidelines come in through the UGC, which when they bring out the guidelines, have representatives of the AICT, the NCT, and many of the regulatory councils. who are relevant in that particular area. Coming to internationalization, as was rightly mentioned by Professor Pawar, and sitting in Hyderabad, it takes a lot of guts to say that we will be able to stem the tide of students going abroad, because that is where the trend had started. But it is now a growing trend across many urban areas, and Kerala itself is witnessing a huge crisis with a number of students going in for undergraduate education. So while sort of fortifying our earlier efforts of student exchange programs, faculty exchange programs, we have talked about joint degrees, dual degrees, and twinning programs, so that many of our higher middle class students and middle class students who are having very strong family bonding may stem their desire to go outside and acquire joint degrees or dual degrees, which come along with a tag of some foreign university. But we went a step further, and we are talking about cross-border higher education with institutional mobility. And for the first time, we are talking about foreign universities setting up their campuses here, as much as Indian universities being allowed to set up their campuses outside. This come with a mixed reaction, which is bound to come. The only thing is, we had said top 100 institutions, and we said it should come through legislation, whereas it has come through an executive regulation and not a legislation. And they have said not the top 100, but they have said the top 500. We have still not got more details as to the applications received, but we should be open to this idea that by allowing foreign universities to set up their campuses here, to some extent, what Professor Pawar was hoping or is hoping, that many of our parents may like their children to remain in their own homeland, stem the revenue loss, and have a more affordable education when they are in their own homelands, and a better sense of assimilation within their own homeland. You're also seeing globally a trend where students who have gone to Canada and many other places, they are not being allowed to continue there for taking up jobs, because there is a lot of in-house feeling that is coming in there. And so it is not so easy as it was maybe 5 years back. So let us hope that changes. But the major criticism that came was that we will add on to the competition to already a very large higher education system. I, for one, always believe that competition is a very healthy term, and competitiveness must be instilled and nurtured in our students. The only thing is challenges where many of our faculty, feeling that there is a better package, may join these foreign universities setting up campuses, which are challenges we have to deal with as we go along, rather than not experimenting into that area. And the last point I'll stop with is the development of languages. National education policy has made out a very strong case for multilingualism. I already gave you the rationale for that. And we have said that in higher education, we have a greater responsibility for setting up language departments, because we should be able to preserve endangered and dying languages, promote and preserve the classical languages, and therefore a number of new classical languages will be coming into being. And we have said that we will have departments for Prakrit, Pali, Persian, which are some of our very classical languages. Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, already they are all declared as classical languages. And we need to work on the language development and create these language departments. And why this becomes important, I think all of us here will understand that higher education has a strong linkage with society. And when you talk about linkage with society, it is not just the teaching and the research, it is also the community engagement and the social engagement. And social engagement comes by connecting with the community, which means you should be able to look at language as being a reinforcing factor, which looks at arts, crafts, music, dance, literature, language, and so on, which are all reflective of the culture of India, and that needs to be promoted by the development of languages. So if you want to understand Kuchipudi dance, you cannot do that unless you understand Telugu as a language. You do not understand Bharatnatyam unless you understand Sanskrit and Tamil. You do not understand Kathakali if I don't understand Sanskrit plus Malayalam. So in every part of India, we have such rich dance forms, art forms, paintings, sculptures, crafts, and so on, which is all related to language and culture. And that is the reason why higher education should take up the cause of not just being institutions which are there as knowledge centers, but which are promoting the Indian understanding and the cultural ethos and make our children truly reflective of unity in diversity. So the NEP has provided a lot of enablers. We as educators must embrace these changes. We are all in a certain comfort zone and we are being shaken out of our comfort zone because of these transformations. But unless we change, we will perish. And in order not to perish and ensure that our children do not perish, we must be able to accept these reforms with a certain sense of acceptance that this is essential for making our students truly becoming the global citizens of tomorrow. So let me just end with a quote from none other than Alvin Toffler, who says that the illiterate of the 21st century is not one who cannot read or write, but is one who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So let us all commit ourselves to this requirement that we will not be the illiterate of the 21st century, and we will not make our children also become the illiterate of the 21st century. The challenges of the 21st century we will take on through the recommendations and through the transformative measures that the national education policy has unfolded and unveiled. I'll stop over here and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, madam, for very elaborative and several issues that you have raised to think and learn by all the participants, particularly teachers and teacher administrators. So, madam, you have covered several things from structured to flexible education system and HOTS, higher order thinking skills. And also, I can say, madam, nowadays, because of competitiveness, nobody can go beyond the implementation of NEP policy. So competitiveness, for example, one state or few states are being implemented, then other states definitely will follow others, otherwise they are lagging behind. So this is also one of the way we can look forward to see that other state governments also will follow the NEP policy in total and make the higher education as a internationalization of higher education so that our students also would flourish on par with global students. So before we conclude, let us have some interaction session from the participants. So
Yes.
now each session is open. Now the participants are requested to interact with madam by asking few questions. But before forum is open, I have a couple of questions, madam, to interact with you. One is how the ODL students are going to cope up, or the conventional system students will cope up with this ABC and multiple entry and exit is one. And number two, it is very close to my mind is that, nowadays a lot of challenges are being posed by not only educational institutions, regulators and all that. I have three important points. I call it very popularly F3 because one F is shortage of funds and a shortage of faculty, leading to frustration among the administrators, teachers, students, and stakeholders, including parents. So I call it F3, funding, faculty, and frustration, because these about two factors, all people are leading to frustration. How to cope up with this system being implemented across the globe. So these are the a couple of things that I would like to raise and seek what you call inputs from you. So how to embrace this NEP by overcome these challenges or issues.
Professor Pawar, I can see Professor Gangappa has raised his hand. So let me
Okay.
hear
Yeah,
him
please.
also and combine it together. Yes, Professor Gangappa, can you please?
Now every participant can interact with the resource person, please.
Yes, Professor Gangappa, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question or share your experience? I think he Did he erroneously raise his hand? Anyway, coming to what
Yeah.
you were saying, Professor Pawar, we must understand that at no point of time these three issues were absent. It was always there. It was always an issue when we were studying. Had been an issue throughout. But for someone who has come from a background of planning commission, and I've seen the other side of the table, I have now realized that higher education institutions are not really doing a lot of good financial management. Sorry to say that. Why
Yeah.
I'm saying that, when you read my, Kiran May read my CV, she said I was the nodal officer for one of the flagship Government of India schemes, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya National Mission on Teachers and Teaching. This is a scheme which actually was formulated and which I had been fortunate to have a major role. 1700 crores was our budget. We went to the Ministry of Finance. They said, no way you can get it. You are going to get 900 crores. We came out happy, even though there is a major cut. We got, in effect, in reality, only something like 450 crores, the actual allocation. Though 900 crores was the outlay, we got only 450 crores. And I can tell you today, it was implemented between 2012 and 2014 to 2020, 21 actually. Though I had retired, I know the figures up to 2021. We spent only 120 crores. The inability of higher education institutions to utilize funds that are available. The meetings after meetings that we have in the ministry are all meetings as to how to enhance the utilization of funds. Now, if you ask for utilization certificate and so on, it is justified because it is taxpayers' public money that we are investing in that. But what institutions like to spend on is construction of buildings. They are not spending on faculty training. They are not spending on enhancing teaching learning resources. They don't want to use technology methods. The easiest thing, हम building बना देंगे और हम classroom upgrade करेंगे, हम ये करेंगे, because that's all capital intensive. The part relating to quality is not just capital intensive, it is also a number of other factors that are there. So that is one factor that I wanted to share. Second is that public funding, when we say we haven't reached 6% of the GDP and so on, even if we are right now at 4.1, combining 17 ministries, center and state, and the school education and higher education, that itself is requiring a lot of impetus to come in from the corporate sector, alumni. Yeah, someone erroneously muted me, I think. Yeah, now I am unmuted. Now I am
Yes,
unmuted.
yes. Please.
So the need to have innovative funding, which is what we wrote in the policy. And while saying this, I am fully seized of the fact that if an IIT is getting 1800 crores per year, as opposed to a state university which gets some paltry 20 crores, that is no match at all. I am not at all making out a case for that. But we need to look at two things. One, that we judiciously optimize the utilization of financial resources and leverage manners in which we can enhance the resources. Say, for example, the local transportation provided, if there are buses provided, mess facilities, hostel facilities should come in through corporate sector participation. And that is not the core service, it is the ancillary service. Coming to faculty shortage, now that ban is not there. At a time when we were all in teaching, there was a severe ban on recruitment. Now that ban is not there. The only thing coming is the roster, and that we need to appreciate because we accept equity and inclusion, but we have to make a concerted effort to fill in the position. And it is only faculty who are treated worse than even daily wage labor in Maharashtra, where I have had my entire teaching career starting. We have this clock hour basis, where you give payment to lecturers on clock hour basis. That is not done. So the need to look at payments to faculty and also to encourage faculty to continue to remain in teaching profession is very much there. Coming to your last one of frustration, I think, Professor Pawar, whether it is in our homes, whether we are anywhere, our attitude must be one that there will always be difficulties to surmount, but we should still be able to find ways to handle that. So I would really, it might sound very, very, because I am right now not the person who is wearing the shoe to know where the shoe is pinching. But at the same time, I would really urge each one of us not to give up our morale and our self-esteem. And on the ABC and this, I'll try and send you something because I see Professor Gangappa has raised his hand. To some extent, I covered it. There are enough guidelines. We need to onboard onto ABC platform, and we have this option. And once across the country in a 2 years period, where all institutions come on, the operationalization of this becomes much easier. At the moment, it is because there is uneven implementation. We are seeing a lot of problems there. Yes, Professor Gangappa, are you still there wanting to ask your question?
Yeah.
Madam,
Anybody?
am I audible, madam? This is a
Yes, you are audible. Yes, you are audible.
Madam.
I had multiple. Yeah, Professor Gangappa, please go ahead and ask. You said you're from Begumpet. I could hear up to that
Otherwise,
point.
anybody?
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, good evening.
Hi,
Madam.
ma'am. Hello.
Yes,
Doctor. Ma'am.
Hello, madam. Can I ask you a small doubt?
Gau.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Ma'am, I have a question about flexible learning pathways, ma'am.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, and thank you for the very informative session, ma'am. Earlier also, I have attended NEP session, the whole day workshop I attended, but I can get more insightful information here. Thank you for that within this 1.5 hour duration. And my question is, ma'am, could you elaborate on how NEP 2020 flexible and modular structure for undergraduate programs, including multiple exit and re-entry points, will be implemented to benefit students? And one more relating to this only, madam, what measures are being put in a place to ensure students understand these options fully and prevent any potential misuse of this flexibility?
Okay. Yeah, Professor Gangappa, can you ask your question also? I'll take it together.
Madam, can I ask my question, madam?
Yeah, please go ahead.
This is BJ Gautam, assistant professor in madam. Madam, from inflow, madam.
Professor Gautam, your voice is cracking up. We can't hear you.
New education policy is implemented. I have a diploma in Carnatic Mridangam, madam. Will my qualification considered and will I be utilized as a music teacher, madam?
You have a diploma in Carnatic music.
Yes, Carnatic Mridangam, madam. Musical instrument Mridangam. If new education policy is implemented, can I be utilized as a music teacher too, madam?
Okay, you'll have to actually see through the regulations that UGC has brought out for appointment of music teachers, which is in the latest regulations that they brought out. So whether the diploma is the minimum requirement or do they ask for something more, I don't want to give you a wrong information. I would suggest you to go through the UGC regulations because they have specified that for music teachers, for many other areas like dramatics and others. What is the minimum requirement that they are asking for? I am sorry, I don't have really that very precise information, and I don't want to take the risk of giving you a wrong information and a false assurance. Can we
Thank
just
you so much, madam. Definitely, I'll go through the website and I can explore, madam.
Yeah, the UGC latest regulations for recruitment of teachers puts those guidelines over there. And coming to what Sarita was asking, firstly, let me try and tell you one thing. Don't think students misuse something. Let us have an element of trust. rather than thinking of misuse. What is the misuse that they do? It is not misuse. It is only that they may leverage something to their advantage. You have 75% attendance. So you then say that I am having only 70%. Can I be treated as having 75? There is a question of a human element. So let us not think any flexibility we give is to be given because we are respecting that the learner needs to be given a flexibility. Now, how they should be well informed about taking
Yeah. Dr. Radhakrishna.
Yeah.
Radhakrishna Raman.
Good evening, madam.
Yeah.
Madam, can I speak? Good evening.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Ravi, you can, please.
Madam, I have messaged it. I think you have read it. The people to carry this mission, NEP, are the faculty resources. This part is neglected, madam, very much. And yeah, as you said, the resources, funding resources are not utilized to the fullest extent by the universities. That is there. But most significant is that many universities are running with less than 50% of the faculty strength, madam. This is a matter of concern. And how can we, without putting the infrastructure in place, how can we install the equipment in that, where there is no infrastructure, we are trying to bring in the equipment. We don't have that infrastructure to contain this equipment. We don't have the facility, physical facility in place. So I request you, madam, since you are in policy making, please, this is very serious concern in many states. Some states are very particular about fixing the faculty pay structures and the standard pay structures. But in many institutes, it is not taken care, madam. And maybe if you look at Telangana and Andhra's, these Telugu states, this is not taken care. And as less as the fee collected is 30,000 per year. 30,000 per year for a particular program. And if you calculate it, madam, it doesn't even come to pay the electricity bill and other maintenance bills, madam. It is not sufficient. And where do these institutes pay the faculty the amount required to carry out so many activities that are enshrined in the NEP? This is a very huge task. So I request you, madam, please, consider this part, not just one or two states, not just few institutes, standard institutes, which are taking care of the faculty pay structures, but not many institutes. To a larger extent, this is not taken care. So this is what I would like to put forth, madam.
So that is exactly, Dr. Ravi, what we said, that the collegiate decision making has to be done. So when the budget is presented by a university, it should take on board all the requirements that come in. And in the policy, we have very clearly said the basic infrastructure, basic resources for faculty like staff rooms, having all the other basic amenities, teaching learning resources, the technology resources all have to be in place. Now, the mismatch between what comes in and how it is being utilized is really a matter of grave concern, because not much of innovation happens in optimizing the available resources. India is not a cash rich country. India is not one where we have a lot of funds available. Within the budget, what we have, we will have to think in terms of optimizing. For example, when I was talking about the planning commission thing, most of our classrooms, except being utilized between 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the evening, remain idle. And it is a huge resource that remains idle. And that part of it, in terms of how it can be doubled up, how we can generate more revenue by having some other skill-based courses in the evening hours, lending it out to some corporate sector, taking some revenue from them, because all that they're looking at is the salary grant, which is coming in now on a regular basis, because otherwise that would be a huge crunch. And addressing the shortage of faculty, as I said, the ban on recruitment has been lifted. Universities have to take efforts to get those vacant positions filled in. Till that time, they have to engage on contract, though it is inhuman. But there is a severe gap between mapping those who have qualified all the UGC, NET, and other requirements and who are lying unemployed and not being used by the institution. There's a mismatch. The number of them who have passed and who have qualified but are not getting the teaching. And here on one side, we are talking that there are 50% positions that are lying vacant.
Exactly.
This is all because of not having a very coordinated approach in the plan making and the budget making and its proper implementation. This is arising because we as faculty are somehow not getting involved into that business of making all these decisions. That's why the collegiate decision making, where representatives like you take on board, okay, this is the SWOT analysis. When we assess the weaknesses, infrastructure deficit, faculty deficit, the lack of equipments, we take that on board. What is the funding that needs to come in? If it is not coming in through the state government, it is not coming in through the UGC, then which is the way we can? And I'm not at all in favor of enhancing fees to meet these funding gaps. Because to make education affordable, we must keep fees at a very rational minimal level. And we cannot think of making higher education elitist. So we cannot think of revenue generation through enhancement of fees. We have to find many other ways in which we try and do that. So one of the reasons that we are talking about corporate sector participation, we wrote that in our report that was at the time of the 12th plan, where we said, where is the product of higher education going out? Into the industry and the corporate sector. And there is a social responsibility.
They have
and
obligation.
all
Yeah.
under the ambit of the tax exemptions for the corporate sector, many activities that related to educational development. And very few of us leverage those kind of funds. Corporate sector will not come to us because they would rather think in terms of the profits that they may like to make. We have to look for that source of funding, approach the corporate sector, and that requires not just the management alone, but many of us in the faculty who can take up that initiatives to start going and leveraging corporate fund, talking to them and making them realize that, see, our student is coming to you. You are taking the benefit of that human capital that we have created. You have a social responsibility to help our educational institution to grow. But don't talk about enhancing fees. If you're enhancing fees, you should be willing to do the major reform of cross-subsidization, where you charge the rich and you allow the poor not to pay. But we have not reached that stage. We don't have cross-subsidization of fees. Policies have not come out in that area. Till that time, let us not talk of enhancing fees. Keep it to the minimal. Some private sector who is coming and charging and giving a glossy paper brochure and getting the rich to join, let them do that. But generally, as educators who think education is a public good and is a public service, let us keep our fees always to the minimal. But the private sector and the corporate sector must play an active role. Research funding, incubation centers, innovation cells, industry academia cells, skill enhancement, setting up of infrastructure, taking care of ancillary services. All these we should be able to leverage for, and they are getting tax benefits because it is already earmarked under exemption for them by virtue of what we have done during the 12th plan as part of private sector participation in higher education. So that is the way to go about it, Dr. Ravi. And I think people like you should become an active participant in the budget making, the plan that we make, the institutional development plan, take a SWOT analysis, find out where is those gaps and find out where that funding can come with a certain timeline of 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. It is not an overnight process. It takes time, but it needs to start right away so that we 3 years down the line, if we are talking like this, we should not be able to have the same problem facing us at that time.
Thank
And
you
come,
so much.
yeah. And I think,
Thank you. We are running short of time. So, yeah, now we
Sarita's
cannot take
point got left
questions
out,
further.
Professor Pawar. Let me just give one line
Yeah, please,
reply,
sir. Please.
Sarita, that there is no misuse of any flexibility and flexible choices must be given to students. For enabling that, we have brought out all these instrumentalities of the academic bank of credit, and the student has to onboard. Let us understand students use technology length and breadth much more than you and I use. You may find it difficult how to onboard onto an ABC. If there is a Zoom platform, what do you do if there is a technical failure? They are adept at all this. Institutions have to come onto the ABC. Once this becomes operational across the country, flexibilities that we are talking will become a reality. There will be no danger in terms of even their privacy, even in terms of the credibility that can be misused by anyone. Don't think someone can get onto the portal of ABC, change their credits from 75, I make it 90, like what you must have heard during the crisis that we just underwent, an unpleasant one. It is not there. It is a very robust portal managed by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, and it is done by the National E-Governance Platform. So the misuse that you are visualizing will not happen. And let us never think that students misuse anything. They are naughty, they are playful. Just enjoy that. We were all at that our times like that. And I think that is the age they are entitled to it. As long as they don't go beyond our certain values and they are not taking to drugs and they're not putting themselves into a situation of depression leading to suicide, I think we should be able to enjoy the youthfulness of our young students.
Thank you, ma'am. And my concern is not only about student side, madam, but cyber fraud. These days we are seeing so much. So in that aspect and covering both students, and that I asked this question, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Very wonderful information.
Thank you, Dr. Sarita. For now we cannot take further questions for interaction, but now time has come to invite our colleague, Dr. Madhuri, Dean Faculty of English, Faculty of Arts, and Professor of English. She is also a member of this IAC Coordination Committee, and she is with us now. Now I request Dr. Madhuri to propose formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Professor Madhuri, over to Professor Madhuri.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Is it my voice audible, sir? Is it clear?
Yes, please.
Can I go ahead? Thank you so much. So good evening, one and all. Warm good evening. It's literally a feast for all of us to listen so many ideas, and specifically from a broad perspective and a holistic approach towards national education policy. We profusely thank our resource person for this wonderful opportunity to listen and to introspect and to see about what is required in the grappling issues are there in the higher education. And we are constantly having a lot of dialogue is needed. So this is the right platform. This is the second time that we are listening to her on behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University. Ma'am, on my behalf and on behalf of our Ambedkar Open University, we profusely thank Dr. Shakila, madam. It gives immense pleasure to propose vote of thanks for today's lecture on transformation in education through NEP, National Education Policy. On behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, IIC, the institution's innovation cell, we profusely thank all the resource person, Dr. Shakila Shamu, madam, for her holistic approach on national education policy. We thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor and the in-charge Register for the administrative support. We extend our thanks to Director Academic, Professor Pushpa Madam, Deans, Directors, HODs, faculty for their academic support and encouragement. Last but not the least, we thank EMMRC, Computer Center, Engineering Branch for their technical and supportive staff. Last but not the least, our research scholars, faculty, and Dr. Pallavi, who made an effort to get the resource person for this right platform. Last, every time I'm speaking about the last, but it is not the last because the time is a constraint, so we are unable to give all the details of what exactly going on inside our four walls. But said and done, on behalf of the university, on behalf of the Department of Commerce and Business Management, we profusely thank all the people for making this happen fruitfully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, one and all. Thank you, madam, for being with us.
Professor Prawar, Professor Kiranmai,
Thank you, madam. Thank you, sir.
and of course, Dr. Pallavi, who first got in touch with me, and to every
Yes.
one of you for patiently
Yeah, thank you
listening.
so much, madam. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.